The shopping bags hit the marble floor like a challenge. Vera Halden stood in our doorway, designer heels clicking against the threshold, arms still full of boutique purchases. Her auburn hair caught the hallway light perfectly. She'd probably spent $200 at the salon that afternoon, too. "It's my money, too," she said, not even looking at me. Just dropped the words like she was commenting on the weather. I sat at our kitchen island, laptop open, credit card statements spread across the granite countertop like evidence at a crime scene, which in a way they were. $37,000, 6 cards, 3 weeks. The numbers didn't lie, even when everything else in my life apparently did. "Let's talk about money," I said, closing the laptop with deliberate calm. Vera finally looked at me then. Really looked. Something in my tone must have registered because her confident smile flickered for just a moment. She set down the remaining bags, Nordstrom, Saks, some boutique I'd never heard of, but whose logo probably cost more than my monthly car payment. "Cole, I know what you're thinking, but do you?" I leaned back in the bar stool, studying my wife of 4 years. When had she become a stranger? When had I become the fool? Because I'm thinking about a lot of things right now. She moved to the refrigerator, pulled out a bottle of white wine. Her movements were practiced, elegant. Everything Vera did looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. Even her lies probably came with good lighting. I had lunch with Beth today. You know how she gets about shopping. One store led to another, and before I knew it... Beth. I nodded slowly. "Right. Beth was with you at Tiffany's too?" Vera's hand froze on the wine bottle cork. "How did you—" "The statements, Vera. They're very detailed. Timestamps, locations, purchase descriptions. Amazing what you can learn when you actually read them." She poured herself a generous glass. Didn't offer me one. That was fine. I needed to stay sharp for this conversation. I'd been planning it for months, ever since I'd started noticing things. Little things at first. Then bigger things. Then things so big I couldn't ignore them anymore, no matter how much I wanted to. "You're being dramatic," she said, settling onto the stool across from me. "So I went a little overboard. It happens. I'll return some things." "Which things? The jewelry? The handbags? Or maybe the weekend in Boston you charged to the Amex?" I picked up one of the statements, pretended to study it. "Though I'm curious about that hotel bill. 2 rooms booked, but only 1 used. Interesting billing error." The wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. In the kitchen's pendant lighting, I could see her face clearly. The moment when confidence shifted to concern, when the mask started to slip. "I don't know what you're implying, but I'm not implying anything." I reached for the folder I'd placed beside my laptop. Thick manila envelope, the kind lawyers use. The kind that holds important documents, life-changing documents. "I'm stating facts. Would you like to hear them?" Vera set down her wine. Her hands weren't quite steady anymore. "Cole, whatever you think you found..." "Found?" I opened the folder, pulled out the first document. A bank statement header visible. First Maritime Bank. Account holder. Vera M. Sterling. Her maiden name. "I didn't find this, Vera. I've been building it." The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. She stared at the statement like it was a snake coiled on our kitchen counter. I don't know what that is." "It's a bank account. Opened 18 months ago. Regular deposits, $8,500, like clockwork, same day each month." I pulled out another document. "Want to guess where the money comes from?" She didn't answer. Couldn't answer, probably. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. "Marcus Ventor," I continued, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Your business partner, the consulting firm you two launched. Impressive revenue stream for a company that doesn't seem to do any actual consulting." "How did you—" She caught herself, but too late. "How did I get these? That's what you were going to ask, wasn't it?" I smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. "Turns out, when you're married to someone, you learn things. Like the fact that you still use your childhood dog's name for every password. Rex 123. Very secure." Vera stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her wine. "You hacked into my accounts? That's illegal, Cole. What's illegal?" I pulled out another document. Then another. "Setting up shell companies to funnel money from your father's business? Forging invoices for services never rendered? Or maybe it's the part where you're sleeping with your business partner and using the profits to fund shopping sprees." She went completely still. Not just quiet, frozen, like someone had hit a pause button on her entire existence. "Barcelona," I said softly. "February, conference trip. You were so excited about the separate rooms, remember? Professional boundaries, you said. except the keycard logs tell a different story. Room 847. Both your cards, all weekend. Stop. Her voice was barely a whisper. The forensic accountant I hired was very thorough, former IRS investigator. She mapped every transaction, every transfer, every lie. 43 pages of documentation. 14 potential felonies, conservative estimate. Vera sank back onto the stool. Her perfect composure was cracking, revealing something desperate underneath, something I'd never seen before in 4 years of marriage. Cole, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I gathered the documents, slipped them back into the folder. I understand that my wife has been stealing from her father's company. I understand that she's been having an affair. I understand that every time she told me she loved me, she was planning her next lie. Tears started down her cheeks, but they looked calculated. Vera had always been good at crying on command. Drama club in high school, she'd told me once. Useful skill, apparently. It's not what you think. Marcus and I were not... You're not what? In love? Involved? Plotting together? Because I have proof of all three. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup. For the first time in years, she looked human instead of perfect. What do you want? She asked finally. I reached into the folder one more time, pulled out a document I'd had prepared 3 days ago. Divorce papers, asset disclosure forms, settlement agreement. Your signature, I said, sliding them across the counter. Full asset disclosure. Uncontested divorce. No alimony. You keep whatever's in your secret account, assuming it doesn't get frozen when the IRS investigation starts. IRS investigation. Scheduled to begin Monday morning. Anonymous tip about suspicious consulting fees at your father's company. They'll find the shell company, the fake invoices, the forged signatures. They'll find everything. Vera stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. You're bluffing. Am I? I pulled out my phone, showed her the screen. Email draft, addressed to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. Subject line, suspected tax fraud and embezzlement. 1 click, Vera. That's all it takes. You wouldn't. Your father will find out anyway. I'm meeting with him Friday morning. Thought he should know where his money's really going before the federal agents show up at his office. She reached for the divorce papers with shaking hands. This is insane. You can't what? Divorce my cheating wife? Report financial crimes? Protect myself from someone who's been lying to me for over a year? I leaned forward, my voice dropping low. What exactly can't I do, Vera? She didn't have an answer. The shopping bags sat by the door like silent witnesses to her greed. Designer labels that cost more than most people's rent, them purchased with stolen money while she pretended to love me. You have until midnight, I said, standing up from the stool. Sign the papers, and maybe I don't send that email tonight. Maybe you get a head start on damage control before the investigation begins. And if I don't sign? I smiled again, cold and final. Then you can explain to your father and the federal investigators why you've been forging his signature on fake invoices. I'm sure they'll be very understanding. Vera looked down at the papers, then back at me. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, and now we're here. I picked up my laptop, tucked the folder under my arm. Midnight, Vera. Choose wisely. I walked toward the stairs, leaving her alone with her wine, her shopping bags, and the ruins of her carefully constructed lies. Behind me, I heard the rustle of papers and the soft sound of someone's world falling apart. It was 8:23 p.m. She had 3 hours and 37 minutes to decide her future. I was betting she'd choose survival over pride. The next morning, I sat in my home office reviewing the digital map I'd created over the past 6 months. Marcus Ventor's life spread across my monitor like a spider web of connections, financial records, and carefully documented lies. If Vera was the architect of their scheme, Marcus was the construction crew and the demolition expert. Marcus Ventor, age 38, business consultant specializing in vendor relations and process optimization. His LinkedIn profile read like a masterclass in corporate buzzword bingo. His bank accounts told a different story. I'd been tracking him since March, when I first noticed his name on Vera's phone. Text messages at odd hours. Business meetings that ran past midnight. The classic signs that every husband learns to recognize, usually too late. But I wasn't every husband. I was a cybersecurity consultant who specialized in forensic data recovery. Finding hidden information was literally my job. Vera had picked the wrong man to lie to. My phone buzzed. Text from Jenny Morrison, bartender at the Lighthouse downtown. Jenny had been feeding me information about Marcus for weeks, ever since I'd started asking the right questions in the right places. Your boy's getting a new toy today. Porsche dealership on 5th Street, 2 p.m. I checked the time. 11:30 a.m. Perfect. The drive to 5th Street gave me time to think about confrontation strategy. I'd learned early in my career that information was only powerful if you knew how to deploy it. Too much too fast, and people shut down. Too little, and they didn't take you seriously. The key was surgical precision. Marcus was exactly where Jenny said he'd be, standing next to a silver Porsche 911, talking to a salesman in an expensive suit. Even from across the street, he looked like money. Tailored jacket, designer shoes, watch that probably cost more than my annual salary, all purchased with stolen funds. I waited until he was alone, keys in hand, before crossing the street. "Nice car," I said, approaching from his blind side. He turned, and I got my first close look at the man who'd been sleeping with my wife, handsome in a generic way. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfect confidence. The kind of man who'd never been told no in his entire privileged life. "Thanks," he said, clearly not recognizing me. "You in the market?" "Depends. What kind of business are you in? Consulting, right?" His smile flickered slightly. "That's right. How did you—" "Marcus Ventor, Ventor Consulting Solutions. Impressive client list. Though I notice most of your revenue comes from one source. Sterling Manufacturing, Vera's father's company." The smile disappeared entirely. He took a step back, hand moving instinctively toward his jacket pocket. "Phone? Probably. Or maybe he was the type to carry something more dangerous. I hoped not." "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" "Cole Halden, Vera's husband." The color drained from his face almost as fast as it had from Vera's the night before. Apparently, guilty consciences ran in similar patterns. "Look, I don't know what you think. I think you've been having an affair with my wife while embezzling money from her father's company. I think you set up a shell corporation to launder the funds. I think you're about to have a very bad day." Marcus glanced around the parking lot, probably checking for witnesses. The salesman had gone back inside. We were alone except for the traffic on 5th Street. "You can't prove anything," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I pulled out my phone, opened the photo gallery. "Invoice 47291. Your signature, requesting payment for vendor optimization services. Dated last Tuesday. Want to guess what Sterling Manufacturing's vendor optimization looked like that day?" He didn't answer. "Nothing. No services rendered. No optimization performed. Just $8,500 transferred to your consulting account, then moved to First Maritime Bank the same afternoon." Marcus's jaw tightened. Even if that were true, it's not illegal to forge invoices, siphon company money, get involved with the daughter of the man you're stealing from. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Which part of that isn't illegal, Marcus?" He looked at the Porsche keys in his hand, then back at me. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something very clearly. I know everything, every transaction, every lie, every night you spent in hotel rooms with my wife. I have bank records, security footage, forensic accounting reports that map every stolen dollar back to its source." "You're bluffing." I showed him another photo on my phone. Security camera image from the Barcelona hotel. Marcus and Vera in the elevator, his hand on her lower back, her face turned toward his. Timestamp clearly visible. "Room 847, I said. "February 15th through 18th. Conference about supply chain management according to the expense reports. Funny thing about hotel security systems. They keep records of everything." Marcus stared at the photo like it was evidence at his own trial, which in a way it was. "Look, Cole? Can I call you Cole? This doesn't have to get complicated. Vera and we can work something out. Maybe end things, go back to just business." "Business?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You call stealing from her father business?" "It's not stealing. We provide legitimate consulting services." "Name one specific service you've provided to Sterling Manufacturing in the past 6 months." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Opened it again. Nothing came out. "That's what I thought." I pocketed my phone. "Here's what's going to happen, Marcus. You're going to end your business relationship with Sterling Manufacturing. You're going to close Ventor Consulting Solutions. And you're going to stay away from my wife." "Or what?" "Or I send everything to the IRS, the FB, and Vera's father. In that order. Let them sort out who gets to prosecute you first." Marcus looked at the Porsche again, probably calculating how much of his stolen money was tied up in luxury purchases, how much he'd lose when the investigation started, how much time he might spend in federal prison. "You don't understand," he said finally. "Vera and we're in love. This isn't just about money." "Love?" The word tasted bitter. You love her so much you convinced her to steal from her own father. She came to me. The consulting business was her idea. She wanted independence, financial freedom. She wanted to spend money she hadn't earned on things she didn't need while lying to everyone who trusted her. I stepped back, putting distance between us. But you're right about one thing. You do love her. You love her enough to go to prison for her. Hope she feels the same way. I turned to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Marcus, nice car. Enjoy it while you can. Federal asset forfeiture is very thorough. Behind me, I heard him call my name, but I didn't turn around. I had what I'd come for. Confirmation that Marcus was exactly as weak and stupid as I'd hoped. Men like him folded under pressure. They were used to easy money and easier lies. When reality hit, they crumbled. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. Text message from an unknown number. This isn't over. We need to talk. M. I smiled and deleted the message. Marcus was right about one thing. It wasn't over. But he was wrong about who held the power in this situation. I had the evidence, the strategy, and the moral high ground. He had a guilty conscience and a Porsche he couldn't afford. I knew which side I'd rather be on. The drive home gave me time to plan the next phase. Vera would have signed the papers by now. I was certain of that. Fear was a powerful motivator, and she'd had all night to imagine federal agents at her door. But signing papers was just the beginning. I had bigger plans for both of them. Much bigger plans. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of New England weather that made everything look like a crime scene. Perfect atmosphere for the conversation I was about to have with Harold Sterling, Vera's father and the unwitting victim of his daughter's financial betrayal. Sterling Manufacturing occupied a converted warehouse in the industrial district, all red brick and tall windows that had probably housed textile workers a century ago. Now it housed precision machinery and the kind of family business that built generational wealth when family members weren't stealing from it. Harold's office sat on the third floor, overlooking the factory floor where his employees built components for aerospace companies. Through the window, I could see workers at their stations, honest people earning honest wages. None of them knew their paychecks were smaller because Harold's daughter was siphoning money into fake consulting fees. Cole. Harold stood when his secretary showed me in. This is unexpected. Everything all right with Vera? Harold Sterling was 62, built like a man who'd worked with his hands before inheriting his father's business. Gray hair, calloused palms, the kind of direct gaze that came from decades of making difficult decisions. He'd always treated me well, better than I probably deserved. That made what I was about to do harder, but not less necessary. That's what I'm here to discuss, I said, accepting his handshake. We need to talk about Vera's consulting business. Something shifted in Harold's expression. Not suspicion exactly, but wariness. Ventor Consulting? What about it? I sat in the chair across from his desk, pulled out the folder I'd been carrying like a weapon for the past week. When did you first approve payments to them? About 18 months ago. Vera recommended them for vendor optimization. Said they could streamline our supply chain, reduce costs. Harold settled back into his chair. They've been very effective. Saved us considerable money. How much have you paid them? I'd have to check the exact figures, but roughly $300,000 over the past year and a half. Why? I opened the folder, pulled out the forensic accounting report. Because they haven't saved you any money, Harold. They've stolen it. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire. Harold stared at the report's cover page, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the first stirrings of anger. He didn't touch it at first, just looked, as if the paper itself might dissolve if he waited long enough. The office felt unusually quiet, the steady thrum of machinery from the factory floor below muffled by thick glass and distance. His jaw tightened, then loosened again, a man recalibrating reality in real time. That's impossible. I've seen the results. Reduced vendor costs, improved efficiency metrics, fabricated. I turned to page 12, highlighted sections clearly visible. Every efficiency report, every cost reduction analysis, every metric they provided, all fictional. The real vendor costs haven't changed. The money you thought you were saving was being transferred to shell accounts. I slid the report closer. Harold finally reached for it, his movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. He read slowly, lips pressing into a thin line as columns of numbers and annotations dismantled years of trust with clinical precision. Harold took the report with steady hands, but I could see the tremor in his fingers as he read. 30 years of business experience, and his own daughter had played him like an amateur. This says... He paused, reading more carefully. This says the consulting fees were approved with my signature. Forged signatures. 47 invoices over 18 months. Your daughter had access to signature samples from legitimate documents. She taught Marcus your signing patterns. Marcus? Marcus Ventor, owner of Ventor Consulting Solutions, also Vera's lover. The report slipped from Harold's hands, pages scattering across his desk like evidence of a crime. Which they were. For a moment he just stood there, staring at the mess, as if the physical disorder mirrored something finally breaking loose in his head. That's... He stopped, started again. You're telling me my daughter has been stealing from my company to fund an affair. I'm telling you she's been stealing from your company, period. The affair is just context. Harold stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor, and walked to the window overlooking his factory floor. His employees continued their work, unaware that their boss's world was collapsing 3 floors above them. Forklifts moved in precise lanes. Machines stamped and cut and assembled. Everything ran exactly as it should, a system built on reliability and trust, both now in question. How long have you known? He asked without turning around. 6 months of suspicions, 3 months of investigation, 1 week of certainty. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Because I hoped I was wrong, because I wanted to give Vera a chance to end it herself, because I'm an idiot who thought love meant something. The words tasted bitter as I said them. Harold remained at the window for a few seconds longer, then turned back, his expression stripped of illusion. Harold turned back to face me. What do you need from me? The question surprised me. No denial, no defense of his daughter, no shooting the messenger anger, just practical acceptance of an ugly reality. I need you to understand what's about to happen, I said. The IRS will be investigating Sterling Manufacturing within the week. They'll find the forged invoices, the phantom consulting fees, the shell company transfers. Your business will be scrutinized, your books audited, your reputation questioned. And Vera? Vera signed divorce papers 2 nights ago. Full asset disclosure, no contest, no alimony. She's trying to minimize her exposure, but the federal investigation will proceed regardless. Harold sat back down heavily, the weight of the chair creaking under him. His shoulders sagged, age suddenly catching up all at once. $300,000. $347,000 to be exact. Plus interest and penalties, the IRS will probably want twice that amount. Can the business survive it? I'd been dreading that question. Honestly, I don't know. Depends on how aggressive the investigation becomes, how much media attention it attracts, whether your customers lose confidence in your internal controls. Harold picked up one of the scattered report pages, studied the forensic analysis of his daughter's betrayal. She was always smart, smarter than me in a lot of ways. I thought that was a good thing. Intelligence without integrity is just sophisticated criminality. He absorbed that in silence, nodding once as if filing it away under hard-earned truths. Did you love her? He asked suddenly. Before all this? The question hit harder than I'd expected. Yes, I loved who I thought she was. And now? Now I know who she really is. Harold nodded slowly. What happens next? I pulled out another document from the folder. I've prepared a complete disclosure package for the IRS. Every transaction, every forged signature, every piece of evidence my investigator found. If you cooperate fully, show them you were a victim rather than a co-conspirator, you might avoid criminal charges. Might? The alternative is letting them discover everything during a hostile audit. That won't go well for anyone. Harold took the disclosure package, hefted its weight like he was measuring the cost of his daughter's betrayal. She's my only child, Cole. I know. I built this business for her. Everything I've worked for, everything my father worked for, it was supposed to be her legacy. She chose a different legacy. We sat in silence for several minutes, 2 men contemplating the wreckage of trust. Outside, the factory hummed with productive activity. Inside, we calculated the price of family betrayal. Will you testify? Harold asked finally. If it comes to that? If necessary, yes. Even though it might send her to prison? She sent herself to prison the moment she forged your first signature. Harold stood, walked around his desk, and extended his hand. Thank you for coming to me first, for giving me a chance to control the narrative. I shook his hand, felt the calloused strength of a man who'd built something real with his own efforts. I'm sorry it came to this. So am I. He looked back out over the factory floor. 47 people work here, Cole. 47 families, depending on the paychecks from a business my daughter was slowly destroying. Whatever else happens, they didn't deserve this. No, they didn't. But she did. It wasn't a question. Harold Sterling had spent 40 years making hard decisions, and he just made another one. His daughter had chosen money over family, lies over loyalty, theft over trust. Now she'd live with the consequences. As I left his office, I heard Harold on the phone with his attorney, beginning the process of voluntary disclosure to federal authorities. He was protecting his business, his employees, and what remained of his reputation. Vera was on her own now, just like she'd left me. The lighthouse sat on the waterfront like a beacon for lost souls and bad decisions. Jenny Morrison had been tending bar there for 6 years, long enough to know everyone's secrets and smart enough to keep most of them. She'd been my information source about Marcus, my early warning system about Vera's movements, and now she was about to become my witness. "He's been here every night this week," Jenny said, polishing glasses with practiced efficiency, drinking expensive scotch and complaining about his problems to anyone who'll listen. I checked my watch. 7:30 p.m. on a Friday. The after-work crowd was filtering in, young professionals and old-timers mixing in the kind of democratic chaos that only happened in waterfront bars. What kind of problems? The kind that involve federal investigations and frozen assets. Jenny smiled grimly. Turns out your boy Marcus isn't as smart as he thought. Word is, his consulting business is about to become very interesting to some people with badges. The IRS had moved faster than I'd expected. Harold's voluntary disclosure had triggered an immediate investigation, and Marcus's shell company was apparently the first domino to fall. Federal agencies loved following money trails, especially when someone had already mapped the route for them. Where's Vera in all this? Haven't seen her, but Beth Morrison was in yesterday, drunk and chatty. Says Vera's been holed up in some downtown hotel since Wednesday. Apparently your house wasn't feeling very welcoming. Beth Morrison, no relation to Jenny despite the shared name, was Vera's best friend and biggest enabler. If Beth was talking, it meant Vera's support network was cracking under pressure. What did Beth say? That Vera's hiring lawyers, big expensive ones, the kind you need when federal agents start asking questions about tax evasion and embezzlement. The bar's front door opened, and Marcus walked in like a man carrying the weight of poor decisions. He looked terrible, unshaven, wrinkled clothes, the kind of desperate exhaustion that came from sleepless nights and guilty consciences. "Showtime?" I murmured to Jenny. "Want me to make myself scarce?" "Actually, I want you to pay attention. This might get interesting." Marcus spotted me immediately. Hard not to, since I was the only person in the bar staring directly at him. He hesitated for a moment, probably calculating whether to leave or stay. Pride won over common sense. It usually did with men like Marcus. He walked over to my table with forced confidence, like he was attending a business meeting instead of a confrontation with the husband of his criminal co-conspirator. "Cole?" He sat down without being invited. "Fancy meeting you here." "Not really. Jenny told me you'd been drinking here all week. Seemed like a good place for a conversation." Marcus signaled the waitress, ordered his usual expensive scotch. "What kind of conversation?" "The kind where you explain why federal agents are freezing your business accounts." His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the drink menu. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. Ventor Consulting Solutions. Shell company registered in Delaware, funded by fraudulent invoices from Sterling Manufacturing. Ring any bells?" The waitress brought his scotch. Marcus downed half of it in one swallow, liquid courage for a conversation he couldn't avoid. "You don't understand the situation," he said finally. "Enlighten me." "Vera and we didn't set out to hurt anyone. The consulting business was legitimate at first. We really were trying to help her father's company." "By stealing $300,000? "By finding inefficiencies in his vendor relationships. The money we saved more than covered our consulting fees." I pulled out my phone, opened the forensic accounting app I'd been using to track their crimes. Show me. Show me one vendor relationship you improved, one cost you actually reduced, one legitimate service you provided." Marcus stared at the phone like it was a weapon pointed at his chest. "It's complicated. The metrics aren't always immediately visible. It's not complicated at all. You forged invoices, stole money, and used it to fund an affair with your business partner's daughter. The only thing complicated is how you convinced yourself it wasn't theft. We fell in love, Cole. That wasn't part of the plan." "Love?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice so the conversation stayed between us. "You love her so much you convinced her to betray her own father? To risk federal prison for fake consulting fees? She came to me with the idea. I tried to talk her out of it." "Really? You tried to talk her out of stealing money that ended up in your bank account?" Marcus finished his scotch, signaled for another. "You wouldn't understand. Vera felt trapped in her marriage, suffocated by expectations. She needed freedom. She needed money, your money, stolen money. It wasn't supposed to go this far. We were going to pay it back, make everything legitimate. When? After you'd bought another Porsche? After you'd taken another vacation to Barcelona? The second scotch arrived. Marcus gripped it like a lifeline. What do you want from me, Cole? I want you to understand what's about to happen. The IRS investigation is just the beginning. Federal prosecutors love cases like this. Clear paper trail, obvious criminal intent, defendants with assets worth seizing. I've hired lawyers. Good lawyers cost money. Money you're about to lose when they freeze your remaining assets. Bad lawyers cost less, but they don't keep you out of federal prison. Marcus looked around the bar, probably searching for sympathetic faces. He didn't find any. Jenny was watching from behind the bar, but her expression was neutral. The other patrons were absorbed in their own conversations, their own problems. Vera says you're bluffing, that you don't have enough evidence to prove anything. Vera's wrong. I have bank records, security footage, forged documents with your signatures, forensic accounting that traces every stolen dollar. I have enough evidence to convict you both twice over. Then why haven't you gone to the police? Who says I haven't? The color drained from Marcus's face. You're lying. I showed him my phone screen. Email confirmation from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Anonymous tip submitted 4 days ago. Complete evidence package delivered yesterday morning. Agent Sarah Chen is very interested in your consulting business. Marcus stared at the email as if it were a final judgment. You destroyed us. You destroyed yourselves. I just documented the process. He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. This isn't over, Cole. Vera and I will fight this. We'll prove the consulting business was legitimate. Good luck with that. Hope you kept better records than the ones I found. Marcus threw a 20 on the table and walked toward the door, his confident facade finally cracking completely. At the threshold, he turned back. She never loved you, you know. Vera told me she was planning to leave you anyway, even before we started the business. Probably true, I said calmly, but she's not leaving with your money anymore. After he left, Jenny came over with a fresh beer I hadn't ordered. That was brutal, she said, sitting in Marcus's abandoned chair. That was justice. What happens now? I pulled out my phone, scrolled to Vera's contact information. Now I have one more conversation to finish. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. Cole, why are you calling me? Because we need to talk, face to face, one last time. There's nothing left to say. I signed your papers, gave you what you wanted. I want you to hear something about Marcus, about the investigation, about what happens next. Silence on the line. Then, where? The lighthouse. 1 hour. I can't. The lawyers said I shouldn't talk to anyone about... The lawyers don't know what I know. Trust me, Vera. You want to hear this before you read it in federal court documents. Another pause. 1 hour. The line went quiet. Jenny looked at me with something like sympathy. You sure about this, Cole? Sometimes it's better to let sleeping dogs lie. These dogs aren't sleeping. They're about to wake up in federal custody. I finished my beer and waited for my wife to arrive for the last conversation of our marriage. Vera walked into the lighthouse like she was attending her own funeral. Gone was the confident woman who'd dropped shopping bags in our kitchen a week ago. This version of my wife looked haunted, pale, thin, wearing clothes that actually fit instead of designer statements. Prison chic, maybe. She spotted me immediately and walked over with the careful steps of someone expecting ambush. Jenny had cleared the adjacent tables, giving us privacy for what everyone knew would be an ugly conversation. You look terrible, I said as she sat down. Thanks, you look vindicated. I am vindicated. Turns out I was right about everything. Vera ordered white wine, expensive brand, old habits. What do you want, Cole? Haven't you done enough damage? Damage? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I didn't forge invoices. I didn't steal from your father. I didn't sleep with my business partner while lying to my spouse. You destroyed my life. You destroyed your own life. I just documented the process. The wine arrived. Vera's hands shook slightly as she lifted the glass. The lawyers say the federal case is weak. Circumstantial evidence, questionable chain of custody. The lawyers are lying to you, or you're lying to yourself. Either way, the evidence isn't circumstantial. I pulled out my phone, opened the video file I'd been saving for this moment. Security footage from Sterling Manufacturing's accounting department, Vera at her father's desk, signing documents with practiced forgery. Camera 7, March 15th, 2:30 p.m., invoice 47291, $8,500 to Ventor Consulting Solutions for vendor optimization services never rendered. Vera stared at the video like it was footage of her own execution. How did you get that? Your father gave me access to everything. Turns out, when you steal from someone for 18 months, they're very cooperative with investigations. Daddy fired you, permanently. Also froze your trust fund, canceled your credit cards, and removed you from his will. Turns out betraying family has consequences. The wine glass slipped from Vera's fingers, red liquid spreading across the table like spilled consequences. She didn't seem to notice. He can't do that. I'm his daughter. You were his daughter. Now you're a federal defendant who embezzled from his business. Jenny appeared with towels, cleaned up the wine without comment. Vera sat motionless, staring at nothing. What about Marcus? She asked finally. What about him? Are they going to arrest him too? They already did, this morning. Federal agents, his downtown condo, very dramatic. Made the evening news. Vera's face went completely white. That's impossible. He would have called me. Hard to make phone calls from federal custody. Besides, his lawyer probably told him not to contact co-conspirators. Co-conspirators? That's what you are, Vera. Criminal partners. The romance was just a side benefit. She started crying then. Quiet tears that looked genuine for the first time in years. This wasn't supposed to happen. We were going to pay the money back, make everything right. When? After you'd stolen how much? $500,000? $1 million? When exactly were you planning to develop a conscience? We needed time to establish the business properly, to generate legitimate revenue. You needed time to steal more money. The business was never legitimate, Vera. It was always just theft with better paperwork. Jenny brought another wine glass without being asked. Vera ignored it. What happens now? She asked. Now you get arrested. Probably tomorrow, maybe Monday. Federal prosecutors like to coordinate these things for maximum impact. And then? And then you go to trial. Federal court, experienced prosecutors, overwhelming evidence. The kind of trial that ends with guilty verdicts and prison sentences. Vera looked around the bar like she was seeing it for the first time. I never meant to hurt anyone. You hurt everyone. Your father, your marriage, your family's reputation. 47 employees at Sterling Manufacturing who might lose their jobs because of your theft. The business will survive. Maybe, if your father can convince customers that his company has reliable internal controls. If the IRS doesn't impose crushing penalties. If the media doesn't decide this story is worth extended coverage. The media? I showed her another screen on my phone. Local news website. Headline visible. Manufacturing company daughter arrested in embezzlement scheme. They love stories like this. Family betrayal, financial crime, attractive defendants. Very compelling television. Vera read the headline with the expression of someone watching her life end in real time. They used my engagement photo. Good picture. You look happy, innocent, makes the contrast more dramatic. She pushed the phone away like it was contaminated. Why are you doing this to me, Cole? Why not just divorce me quietly and move on? Her fingers trembled as she pulled her hands back into her lap, curling them inward as if she could physically distance herself from what was coming. The glow from the phone screen lingered between us, reflecting off the polished tabletop, a reminder she refused to look at. Her eyes were red, her mascara smudged, the carefully curated image cracking in real time. Because quiet divorce doesn't address federal crimes. Because your victims deserve justice. Because actions have consequences, even for pretty women with rich fathers. I kept my voice even, not loud enough for the rest of the bar to hear, but firm enough that there was no mistaking my resolve. This wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. I loved you. The words came out thin, almost reflexive, like something she'd practiced saying to herself in the mirror. No, you didn't. You loved what I represented. Stability, respectability, cover for your real activities. I was useful until I became inconvenient. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Her shoulders started to shake, the composure finally giving way. Vera started crying again, harder this time. Several other patrons glanced over, probably wondering what domestic drama they were witnessing. A waitress slowed as she passed our table, then kept moving. This wasn't the kind of scene anyone wanted to get involved in. What do you want from me? She asked through the tears. Nothing. There's nothing left I want from you. The words felt final, in a way nothing else had before. Then why did you ask me here? I leaned forward, lowering my voice so only she could hear. Because I wanted you to understand something very clearly. This isn't happening to you. You did this to yourself. Every choice, every lie, every forged signature, you chose this outcome. Her head shook back and forth, small and frantic. I made mistakes. You committed crimes, repeatedly, systematically, for over a year. I can make it right. I can pay the money back. With what money? Your assets are frozen, your trust fund is canceled, your business accounts are seized. You're broke, Vera. The word broke landed harder than anything else I'd said. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again, as if she'd just realized there was no safety net left. She looked at me with something like desperation. Cole, please. We were married for 4 years. That has to count for something. It does count. It counts as 4 years of lies I'll never get back. I stood up, the chair scraping softly against the floor, and pulled out my wallet, leaving money for both our drinks. The federal agents will probably contact you tomorrow. I suggest you cooperate fully. It might reduce your sentence from 15 years to 10. 15 years? Her voice cracked on the number. Embezzlement, tax evasion, wire fraud, conspiracy. The charges add up quickly. Vera grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. Her grip was surprisingly strong, nails digging into my sleeve. Don't do this, Cole. Please. I'll do anything. You already did everything. That's why we're here. I pulled free of her grip and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard her calling my name, again and again, each time softer, but I didn't turn around. Some conversations don't have good endings. Outside, the October air felt clean and cold. It hit my lungs like a reset. Jenny followed me onto the sidewalk. You all right? She asked. I'm fine. That was hard to watch. It was harder to live through. Jenny lit a cigarette, studied my face in the streetlight. What happens to you now? Now I rebuild. New apartment, new life, new wife eventually. Everything Vera should have done instead of choosing theft and lies. Any regrets? I thought about it for a moment, watching traffic move along the waterfront. Just one. I regret not seeing who she really was 4 years ago. And if you had? Then 47 people would still have secure jobs, Harold Sterling would still have a daughter, and Marcus Ventor would be stealing from someone else's family. Jenny dropped her cigarette, crushed it under her heel. Sometimes the right thing feels wrong. Sometimes, but it's still the right thing. Inside the lighthouse, I could see Vera still sitting at our table, staring at nothing. Tomorrow, federal agents would arrest her. Next month, she'd face a grand jury. Next year, she'd probably be in federal prison. But tonight, she was just a woman who'd made catastrophically bad choices and finally run out of people to blame. I walked to my car and drove home to pack the last of my belongings. The divorce was final, the investigation was complete, and my marriage was officially over. It was time to start the rest of my life, the one without lies, theft, and betrayal.